Happy birthday, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely to have you today on your birthday. Many, many more, and many, many more good Alte Zagen presentations from you in the future.
Good. Let's go.
All right. Peter, let me
I
bring
see
you
my
on.
brother Martin is signed on.
Yeah. There you go. You're on, Peter, on Spotlight.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Peter Kalish, and I was one of the original 6 young men who participated in our monthly luncheons. Thank you for enabling me to introduce the 3rd birthday episode of Alte Zagen. Alte Zagen was the brainchild of Brian Fine and Boyke Zeidel, who a few years ago suggested that a group of us meet for lunch once a month at a kosher restaurant and just catch up on the latest topics. It started with 6 of us, and the invitation was extended to anyone that would like to join us, and the group soon expanded to nearly 20 people. And Brian took it upon himself to start contacting and encouraging everyone each month to join the luncheon. Soon thereafter, he suggested we invite a guest speaker to discuss topics of interest. And within a short time, the number of participants grew so that a restaurant was no longer feasible. And Brian approached Jewish Care, who became our amazing hosts. A dream doesn't become a reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work. And Brian and Boyke were ready for the challenge. Alte Zagen currently is supported and attended by between 250 and 400 people, with several of them from overseas. And it is appropriate that its 3rd birthday falls on the same day as Brian Fine's birthday and Boyke Zeidel's 50th wedding anniversary. I'm sure everyone joins me in wishing Brian a very happy birthday and many more in good health, so you can continue for many, many years to come your amazing and tireless work you undertake for Alte Zagen, Rotary, and many other charities, as well as your playwriting, a new acquired skill, and your multiple other philanthropic activities. Hard work spotlights the character of people. Some turn up their sleeves, some turn up their noses, and some don't turn up at all. Theodore Roosevelt once said, "Far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." You, Brian, certainly fall into this category, as does Boyke, whose wife has tolerated him for 50 years, and may you and Marlene be blessed with the good health to tolerate each other for many years to come. Thank you all, and I will now hand over to Brian Fine to introduce our wonderful guest speaker. Thank you.
Mike, if you could put us on. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'd just like to welcome you. Peter, I asked you to welcome everybody, not to pat me on the back, but your check is in the post, so thank you for your kind words. It's great to get back to another Alte Zagen meeting. We have a very different meeting today in that we're going to be having a chat rather than a speaker. We're going to have a chat in the form of a discussion, really, with Vivian Falk. Now, I met Vivian at a Rotary meeting where she came as a, what would you call yourself?
Ambassador.
An ambassador for melanoma. And she spoke about melanoma. So there's a very big range of things she speaks about. But during that speech, she mentioned some other things. And I thought, hold on a second, there's something more to this woman than meets the eye. And so I sat down with her, and the minute she started speaking, I was fascinated by some of her tales, which we are now going to hear about today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Vivian Falk. Vivian sitting beside me here. Vivian, very welcome to the Alte Zagen. You've been before.
Yes.
You told us a little bit about yourself, and now you got, some of the same stories, but there's so much more to you, and we're going to be going through some of those things today. So to go into Vivian's life, we need to go back into the history. And in going back to the history, we need to go back to the 1940s, or actually late in the 1930s. Oh no, sorry, I have shot. Today we are going to start off. Excuse me, guys, it's my birthday. I've got a license for this.
I'll prompt you.
Today we're going to start off with the future, not the future, the present. Vivian has recently done an incredible portrait of Eddie Jaku. You all know Eddie Jaku. He spoke at our organization, and we are going to be talking about that in a bit of detail. I'd like to get into the artist and into the painting. So let's have a look at this.
Thanks, Brian. Look, thank you for having me again. Nothing can please a speaker more when they actually are asked to return to talk again to a group. And that gives you the confidence. Once you do one talk, you think, gee, I hope something came out of that. To be asked back twice, and then this is the third time, it's a great honor. And I really appreciate you presenting my work and my stories and everything that I believe is of importance to all of your group. It's amazing. My life has had quite a lot of interest, and that's why I am writing a book called Madam, Your Roots Are Showing, which is the roots of life and the roots of my history. And starting with Eddie, I painted this Eddie came and I painted him last year, when before COVID-19, before lockdown. Now, Eddie Jaku, I think everybody knows Eddie Jaku. He's the most amazing, inspirational person. And it was a great honor for him to give me time. Now, Eddie was turning 100 then. He wasn't 100. Now he proudly says he's 107 months. And so everything about him is inspiring. But something I found, we had a wonderful time at the sitting, but something I found that he says, and I'd like to share with you, he says, don't walk in front of me as I may not be able to follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not be able to lead. Just walk beside me and be my friend. Now, amazing words. Blows you away.
And I guess when, I'm looking at this painting of Eddie that you did, it looks more like a photograph. And that smile on his face at 100 years of age.
And 7 months.
And seven months. It just tells so much. So maybe you can give us a bit of a background about the painting and what you tried to portray.
Okay, Eddie labels himself as the happiest man on earth, and he really is. And he's written a book to that extent. But when he came to me, and in his hand, he had pictures in the palm of his hand of his family, the family that he lost, and something that he wanted to remember, and he wanted them to know about it and remember. And I found that if one constantly remembers and talks about departed loved ones, they will never die, and will alive in our heart. They'll remain alive in our hearts and in our memories. that meant a lot for me with
So
my past.
those people in the
Those
background?
people are his family that he lost. Now, he's such a happy person in himself, but he still has that as his memories. Now, if they hadn't gone up on the canvas, what would happen? Would they be lost? They had to be put onto a canvas and put on so that he's looking at them, looking back, which is darker, and with the, unfortunately, the Holocaust, with I paint in metallics, and the hardness of it has to be reflected to show, but with the copper haze to show the Holocaust and what we remember from it. But then he's also looking forward. And he came, I always say, wear whatever you want. Well, it is quite a precise person. And he came with a particular tie and a jacket and a shirt. And he had me crying, he had me laughing, and he just had so much energy. I was exhausted. He just bounded out and went on to another talk.
Well, he's amazing, and his book. I got a hold of the book the other day, and it's worth going out and purchasing this book. It's to have a man with such an inspirational message. I think he must be the most outstanding in my respect.
And
of the Holocaust survivors. He's
that's right.
Just
and he speaks all over the place. He asked me, and I laughed. I said, wear what you want, but what's, is there anything particular you'd like me to portray? And I called the painting Remember Me, and it's just won first prize in the Wallenberg Art Prize.
Oh, wow.
And he asked me to make sure I paint his hair thick. So please, we have a lot there, but we have also a man that is really switched on. And
so you can be
it.
naive a little bit and worry about your ego when you get to 100.
Totally, 107
on my 75th birthday today, I look forward to having, I'm not going to have Eddie's hair, but that is fantastic and a great, great painting. Now, we're going to move on a little bit because we have a lot to go through. And as I said before, we've got stories, and those stories, we're going to go back to the 1940s now, to a time when there was an incident in Haifa harbor. I don't know how many of you know about this boat. It's called the Patria, and there was a tragedy. This boat was packed with Jewish refugees. They'd been pouring down. There were 3 ships that arrived with refugees packed to the hilt, and the Haganah, believe it or not, tried to sabotage this boat because the boats were about to be sent off, taking these refugees to detention camps around the world. And I found it a fantastically interesting story, just the story of the Patria. So how do you get connected to this Patria story?
I get connected through my father. My father was on the Milos, and then he was on the Atlantic, and then behind the Patria as they went into Haifa and stormed the blockade, trying to get to Israel. Now, how that happened is my father, Fritz Abeles, who changed to towelbearer for his company, he left in December 1939 with the Maccabi group, and they were hoping to get to Israel. Now, my father kept a diary, and this diary continuously was written in every day with drawings and illustrations and details about what happened. Fascinating. And it's in the Jewish Museum and was put on exhibition and has been translated. He spoke 5 languages. So there was 5 different language entries in the diary. But he was started on the 10th of December with the Maccabi group, and they then ended up in an internment camp and trying to still get to Israel. They had, it wasn't an easy journey. They found that when they were in internment camp, they were taunted a lot by the only meat they were given was on Shabbat, and it was pork. And it was bad pork.
So where was this?
It was in Bratislava.
Okay.
And then he managed to get onto the Helios, 4th of September, and get down to Haifa. But then, of course, with the Patria, the Haggadah decided to do an explosion, which they thought would get everybody into Haifa.
Well, the story goes, of course, that the Haganah wanted to stop the boat from going, and they sent in their agents and they smuggled some explosives onto the boat. And what happened is they took too much, and the boat was sunk, and 270 people perished that day. So it was a very tragic time in the story.
172 were injured, and there was 1,800 Jewish refugees.
Wow.
Originally, 3,600 Jews left from Vienna and from Prague. And this is a story that often isn't even spoken about or recorded. My father was number 824. So again, numbers were important, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately,
yeah.
we're numbered people.
And what happened with him is he then managed to get to Mauritius.
Mauritius, what? Are you? Well, let me just show you the slide. This is when I was in Israel last year. I did manage to get a picture of the Patria, what was left of it, and you can see the photograph of the sinking in the harbor. But let's move on to Mauritius. And would you tell us a little bit about your dad and how he landed up in Mauritius, of all places?
What happened in Mauritius, and is written in the diary, they were put into this, it's a prison there now, it was a detainee camp. And Mauritius you think of as a holiday resort, this was no holiday. He wrote in his diary, and you can relate that to even now with COVID-19, he wrote 2 to 3 people are dying every day.
Oh my God.
He wrote that in 1941 in his diary. And he said, we're given bad drinking water. It's not drinkable. We found this, we're covered with fleas. There's mosquitoes. We've got malaria. We've got tropical diseases. But he wrote, and I think it's inspiring, he wrote, he who fights has rights. He who does not loses all his rights.
Okay, so these, and I believe there were 1,590 refugees that spent 5 years on Mauritius.
5 years, yes.
And you saw the gravesite. There's a Jewish cemetery on Mauritius, and there are many South Africans listening in today that would have no idea, and many of us visited Mauritius. Yes. So it's quite amazing that that happened. Can you just tell us a little bit about the gravesite, and then we're going to ask you about what happened further with your dad?
Yeah, I think you have a photo of the gravesite. I went and visited Mauritius and visited the gravesite, and there was 128 buried in St. Martin's Cemetery, and walking around, some were as young as 3 years old. And it's sad. Now, I noticed there was no stones. It was just a clear, totally clear cemetery. It looked so lonely. And I went and spoke to the caretaker, and he said, oh, no, we're paid to maintain it. We brush all the stones off. And I said, no, keep the stones there. That's what we do in the Jewish religion, to let people know that someone has been, and it is there. And they didn't realize, they thought they were keeping it tidy. And so from then on, I hope the stones were kept. But, you know, it's something that a lot of people just didn't think they'd end up there.
Unbelievable. It's just such a new experience. And for many South Africans, because I know we do have a lot of South Africans that are watching this, this would be something totally new. And yet the whole financing of the Jewish population on Mauritius was done by the Jewish Board of Deputies. And for the past 80 years, they have maintained these grave sites. And today, well, almost today, those are the grave sites. And here it is. You might even notice some of your friends in these pictures. This was a reunion a few years back, but there is going to be a reunion.
There's a December.
In December.
Coming up, an 80th anniversary. And originally they were hoping all the descendants from the survivors would be able to come back for a reunion, but we're now doing a Zoom reunion, and they're marking a memorial that you've got South Africa, you've got the Jewish Museum from Washington involved, and you've got Israel as well,
So,
from the Holocaust Museum. They're trying to now make it more aware of really this was
Memorial.
it was another memorial, and it was a lot of people who suffered there. You know, my father wrote on the 1941 on it was his birthday.
Oh, okay.
And he was so happy. It was his 37th birthday, and he wrote, "Wow, it's my birthday. I got a pair of brown rubber boots." He said, "I also got a pair of wooden clogs. I managed to get a quarter of a kilo of sugar and 1 black coffee, but I got a whole loaf of bread and 2 biscuits. I've got a slice of butter. This is so much to look forward to for my next birthday."
When we think of refugees here in Australia and look back at the Jewish history, the similarities are quite amazing. But we're not getting into politics. And we don't want to go down that trap. So what actually, you have some connection with South Africa somehow?
My father wrote to the South African Czech consulate to join the army. And that was the only way people were. He wasn't a soldier. He actually survived by being a graphologist and reading palmistry. And that's how he managed to be able to buy a potato or get some decent water.
Can you read my poem?
Would you want to go there? And he asked, a lot of people were getting out because they had been soldiers and were joining the army. And he asked and requested to also join as a civilian. And that had to go through the South African consulate.
Yes.
And they agreed to let him go to London, join the Czech army. And he joined it in 1944 after 5 years of internment. That's how he managed to get out and join the army in London in Chalwell.
Okay, well, your father was a very interesting man. I believe his name was Abels, or Abels.
Yes.
Or I would call it Abels. Something very, very interesting happened to one of your ancestors. This can blow your mind. It says here, your maiden name was Abelez, a saint on the family tree. Would you like to tell us about...
You mean that every family doesn't have a saint?
No.
Are you
There's
sure?
a Simon Abelez.
Abelez was Prague, a very prestigious Jewish family, and it was a relative of our family. Now, it was Moshe David was the president in Prague of the Jewish community. Mm-hmm. And Simon Abelez's parents was Leah Abelez and Zahar Abelez. Now, Simon was bar mitzvah age, and he was fascinated with music. He loved music. And so he would often go and sit in the Church of the Lady Before Time in Prague because he liked the music. Now, they had a fire there, and he actually saved the church from burning down. And so he was welcomed, obviously, for going back. This didn't go down very well with his parents, who didn't particularly want him to be visiting a church for the music or for whatever. And there's different stories. He died at 14. Some blame that someone killed him because they wanted to convert. It's an unknown thing. He was buried in the Jewish cemetery, but the church dug him up and put him then in the church. In it, where if you go into the church, there's where the Queen sits and the King sits, and in between they've buried Simon in the church. Now, as a relative, I went, and you can go behind and you can see everything, and we were greeted with open arms. It was amazing. They asked us, they have a book that royalty signed that when they've been over the years. This is 1697 we're talking about, when he became buried.
Very few Jewish boys. They usually have bar mitzvahs. And we got asked to sign the royalty book. So there's all the royalty, and there's Vivian Falk, Sydney, Australia. It was fascinating and interesting times. Well, I believe, there was a lot of animosity between the Jews and the Christians, and the fact that they had to steal the corpse of this boy and take him to the church. Now, the Jews, apparently, from what I'd read, were not strong enough to stand up to the power of the church. So this boy became a saint.
Yeah.
So,
but he never actually converted.
No, they converted him. Anyway, what we're going to do now, your father was a very interesting man.
Yes.
What we're going to do now, we're going to learn a little bit about your mum. Now, this is a picture. Unfortunately, it's not the clearest picture in the world, but it is a picture of your mother and a friend.
Yes.
And a photograph is being taken of them, and behind them there are 2 SS officers.
Yeah.
Would you just like to tell us your involvement? What happened to this?
My mother's on the left with a hat, and she's with her, and she was 17 at the time, and she was engaged to Max. She was living then in Linz. They had come from Vienna, and my grandfather was a prominent engineer, so he'd been Austrian engineer, and he'd been transferred to Linz to help with building the railroad, and they were living there. Now, she was standing next to her fiance's sister, and they were just having their photo taken. They wanted to get together when Eichmann came.
Can I let your mother tell the story?
You can. Yeah,
okay.
That'd be lovely.
I hope you can all hear this.
And he took this picture of us too, never dreaming that down the stairs would come these 2 SS officers. They didn't know, of course, we were Jewish, yet they never looked Jewish, and Erwin, who did, was hidden behind a camera. So they said they were just arrived on the scene in full SS uniform. They wanted to be in the picture too. And as it was pointed out to me later on by somebody who knew them quite well, that one of them is actually Eichmann, or was Eichmann. So this is quite a unique picture.
Well, it certainly is a unique picture. And where is that picture?
It's in
today?
Washington now, in the Jewish Museum, quite a large picture of it as such. And Kafka, who still corresponded with my mother, and she was married to David Block, to Dr. Block, sorry, who...
Dr. Block? Dr.
Block is the doctor, that was the family doctor, and he lived, there he is, Edward Block, and he lived in the same building with my parents' family doctor, and he was Adolf Hitler's doctor. And he looked after Adolf Hitler and cured him from tonsillitis when he was little in 1904. And then he looked after Adolf Hitler's, his Jewish doctor, and he looked after Adolf Hitler's mother, who died of breast cancer. Now, he made sure that Dr. Block escaped to America.
I did read up on that. There's a little quote over here, which is quite ridiculous, but it's worth looking here. The Führer stated that Dr. Block was a noble Jew, further stating that if all Jews would be like Dr. Block, there would be no Jewish question. I mean, serious.
Well,
But if I may just say something, because I did read up on this, and there were 2 postcards that Hitler had actually sent to Dr. Bloch in his lifetime. Do you know about the postcards?
he was an artist as well. Yeah.
Oh, you keep telling me things. Yes, he might have been an artist, but he sent 2 postcards to Dr. Bloch, and in 1939, he sent the Gestapo around to Dr. Bloch's house, asking very nicely, can he get the 2 posters back? Postcards. And after that, he sent Dr. Bloch to America with his family, where Dr. Bloch lived until 1945 or 6.
That's right. Yeah.
An interesting story.
Interesting story, but my mother's feeling was that Hitler felt very despondent that Dr. Bloch didn't save his mother, and he couldn't. She had breast cancer, and that's where some of the animosity happened to be against the Jewish people, and that's her theory. But she said until 1939, she wasn't aware of Linz having that much anti-Semitism. She said there were 600 Jews that lived there, and they were well received. And then everything after Auschwitz, of course, turned. And now Eichmann also lived in Linz. I didn't know that. He came from Linz as well.
Don't too much information for me.
It's all in my book.
Okay, so now we go on to your younger life. I mean, you landed up in Australia.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe you can just give us a quick, tell us what happened on the ship.
Okay.
Because we're going to be talking about things like chocolates and everything else. But
Okay.
you arrived on a ship.
We came. How did I get on the ship? My father met my mother. My father lost his family when he was 40 from Prague, and he got introduced to my mother in England because he was in England, and my mother was the only person that survived from her family, because even though he was a prominent engineer, my grandfather, he thought he would be safe. He got a lot of people out of Vienna, out of Linz, and he, unfortunately, everybody perished. My mother is the only one that managed to get to England.
Yeah, okay.
Do you want to go there, or do you want to go to the top?
I thought we've got so much ground to cover. No, I find it fascinating, the tale. And then you went to Israel?
Yeah, no, well, what happened is so that he would get discharged from the army, he had to go back to Israel, and that's where he would get discharged. And being German, from Vienna and from Prague, and being refugees, they needed to get somewhere to status. They hoped to be able to get back to Israel and settle in Israel. But when they got to Israel in 1946, then life just was very hard. I was born there my sister was born in Palestine. I was born in Israel in 1950. And they didn't want any more wars. They'd had enough. And Israel also, all the refugees settling in Israel didn't have it any easy. It wasn't any easier for them. Though my mother often wrote, and my father wrote, that they might be able to get fish, but they couldn't get the ice to keep the fish. Or they got the ice and then there was nothing to put on it. Or it was hard if they got one egg. It was quite a hard life for them. And also my mother would push the pram through the sand, and she would be a nurse and try to help people. Giving polio was broken out at the time, so they decided to come by boat, and they came on the Australia boat. And I remember the boat trip very well. It was horrible. I remember being on a bunk and the seasickness. I never thought I'd do another cruise, but I did get talked into that. When we arrived, we were refugees. Now, I was only 3.5, and everyone was waving and cheering, and we got great reception when the boat did land in January in 1954. But I couldn't see, no one was lifting me up to see over the handrail. But all I did see and get thrown was a roll of chocolate. Now, I didn't know what this was.
I do.
I do now. I'd never had chocolate, never ever tasted chocolate in my life. It wasn't something that was given to anybody. And so it became an obsession. And
Okay,
I
well,
love
we're going to
chocolate.
talk about chocolate a little bit later. So you got to Sydney, you got an education, and I believe you landed up at this School of Art in near Paddington or Surrey Hills.
What happened is my parents, I always wanted to be an artist. That's something I wanted to do. But my parents said, go and work. Art will not pay anything. Work, and then later on, go back and do art when you can afford it. So I would study at night art at TAFE, and I did hairdressing. And I left school at 15. We couldn't afford for me to stay on. And I worked as a hairdresser.
I got a picture of the Queen up there.
You got a picture of the
I'm going to
Queen.
talk about her, but you didn't do like Yul Brynner's hair or anything like that.
No, what happened is I met my husband whilst I was doing hairdressing as an apprentice. I was 16. My husband was studying commerce and he was 19. So we then decided to get married, and he was transferred to Canberra to join Treasury, to join the government. So I'd finished training. So I went to Canberra and started. Then it wasn't such a common thing to have high-end hairdressing salons. And also men didn't go then to hairdressing salons. It was barbershops, that was it. So I started a hairdressing, very upmarket one. The International Hotel at Lakeside International Hotel opened, and I was only 23 then, and I decided to open a hair salon, a very upmarket hair salon, and introduced men and women. And I ended up having 2 salons, one in Monaco and one in the Lakeside, and a TV show advising women on hair and beauty. So anybody who's anything came to my salon.
And these people are somewhere?
They all came. Now, what happened was, because visiting tourists had to get their hair done, and those days it wasn't just a quick blow over, it was a wash, dry, and so you spend quite a bit of time with these people. And that's where the title for my book, Madam, Your Roots Are Showing, came up. I saw these people and I was with these people and I spent time with the people and their backgrounds and where they've come from and where they've been all comes out as a hairdresser, plus their roots, which you can, look. I did Margaret Thatcher, she was there. I continuously stayed with her and did her hair, and found it's amazing that a very powerful woman, but Dennis, her husband, was coming up continuously giving her notes on what to say to the press, what to do. The Queen's hairdresser, as you saw, came in to get product, and I supplied all the product and I didn't get paid. And Margaret Thatcher, Princess Margaret couldn't use the Queen's hairdresser, so we looked after her. So I spoke to the ambassador from England's wife when she came to get her hair done. And I said, I didn't get paid for when the Queen was here. And I made a joke because I've got a really dry humour. And I said, now the Queen's indebted to me for life. And that didn't go down that well. I actually received a cheque from Buckingham Palace for $1.50. $1.50 was a lot of money.
Oh, okay.
It was a lot of money then. I was 23, a businesswoman. So I banked it. No regret.
I bet you'd love to have that check today. Okay, well,
we also had the salon, but the Shah of Iran came, and we had ProHeart. We met a lot of amazing people, and their stories. A lot of things unfolded in my salon, and it was interesting.
I'm sure it was quite a place. Well, many of you know, I have this love for chocolate. I was in a chocolate business, and when I mentioned this to Vivian, she said, "You were in a chocolate business? You want to hear a little bit about my chocolate business?" So, Vivian, just give us an idea about what you...
Chocolates by Vivian. What happened is, after 9 years in Canberra, I sold my hair salons. I had 2 children, and they would just come to work with me. But we thought it'd be great for Jewish life that we would move up to Queensland. My husband got transferred to Queensland government, and we thought there would be just a nice beginning for them. I was also trying to have more children and having trouble, so we thought that was a good way to start. But when I was in Brisbane, I dabbled with chocolate making, and that was me featured.
Young girl.
Yeah, I started by first just doing chocolate classes at home. I had another child by then who was a baby, and people started coming. The phone kept ringing. So as they came, I then got asked to do it in the TAFE courses. And so I would then make the chocolate molds for the people to be able to use in the class to make their own chocolates. These molds went all around Australia, Kmart, every store around Australia, and then it got exported to 7 countries overseas as well.
7 countries?
And it was in New Zealand, it was in Singapore, it was in Harrods, in London, Selfridges. It was very big in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We found, as I travelled, I was only quite young, but remember I had also born in Israel on my passport. So when I would land in Kuala Lumpur, I would get body searched because I was there with a bag of chocolate, but I was Jewish and I was born in Israel. So to overcome that, the schmaltzy, they kept thinking, what am I carrying? My husband came along for trips as well. He loved it. He'd go sightseeing. And I stopped having these big men who would greet me at the airport and just say, we're with you the whole time and we're following you. And they got off my backs and made life a lot easier. Then in Australia, as the stores would return any damaged chocolate, I would melt that and send it back to David Jones as a finished item. And that would go as finished chocolates or corporate chocolates and all the little plum puddings that you see in David Jones. I sold that business after 14 years when we were coming back to Sydney.
Hold on a second. I'm going to stop you there because you came back to Sydney for a reason.
Yes.
You told me yesterday. You never told me before I could make a slide. So tell me a little bit about why you came back to Sydney.
I came back to Sydney. My daughter was going to start university back here, and we had the influence of the Rebbe. I wasn't religious at all, but you don't like woo-hoo things. Okay. But the Rebbe had told me that it was I should come back to Sydney. He was one of the first paintings I did when I got back to Sydney because I wanted to put a painting of him. That wasn't the first painting that you see up there. It was one painting that is now in 770 with a good friend, a rabbi of mine, Rabbi Braun, who's in 770.
Okay, well, I haven't got too much time because this was not part of the agenda, but every time you speak to Vivian, something new comes out. And she started talking about the Rebbe, and today is a special day for the Rebbe or something.
Yes,
well,
quickly. All the shlichus around the world, when you asked me to come today, I thought, wow, it's this past weekend, they've had meetings where normally you meet in America and everybody goes to America and they all join up. But see, this is the positive of COVID-19. We're now online and all the world can join together and all the world can hear stories and we're connected as one, which is something the Rebbe always said would happen.
We are speaking. We have a rabbi on today,
yes.
Rabbi
Zagen.
Yes, it's so nice to see you out there. I don't know how many other Rabbanim we've got here, but it's very nice to see you.
Yes.
We're going to move on because we're moving on.
You can get all of it from my book.
Look, I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the paintings. So we're going to flash through some of the paintings, but to give you an idea of the range, when I walked into Vivian's house, I was confronted by this unbelievable scene on the Sydney Ballet Company.
Yes.
It sort of knocks you over. So am I going into a house or a palace? But it's a little house near the shul, and it's an art gallery.
Yeah.
We have our friend Malcolm over here now. Yes. Just very quickly, this one,
That was in the Archibald.
that was in Archibald?
I've been fortunate that I've been in, won quite a lot of awards and been in most major art exhibitions and prizes. And this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't come back to Sydney and I could do my art, which I love. And I've met some amazing people. I've met Malcolm Turnbull, Ros Packer, James Morrison, John Morrison.
We're going to talk about a couple. I've got some surprises for you. So let's just move on. Bye-bye, Malcolm. Ros Packer,
Yep.
the reason I put this picture up was just to give an idea of the size of the paintings that you do.
Yes.
It's a beautiful painting. We now have James Morrison. Now, we all know and love James Morrison.
Yes, he's an amazing
the
man.
jazz people, amazing man.
Yeah.
When you were painting James, I believe his brother was around.
Yes, John. When backstage, John is James' brother, and he's the drummer in the band, and he's called Cat in a Hat. Now, look, that's exactly how he was sitting at the back. He looked exhausted, and he looked like, you know, I called this painting on the radio, and I asked John, would he mind if I could paint this for my own private collection. It ended up being exhibited in Washington and the Australian Embassy. It's won 5 awards. Margaret Olley chose it as her recommendation, the Mossman Art Prize. It took a lot of work. He came and sat at my studio, and he loved that I did this. He lives on a boat, so he couldn't hang it anywhere, and I've had it in my collection. Interesting thing with that, just going a bit more into art details.
Okay, let's get into this.
Just painting. Because people like to know. If you have a look at the shirt, it's blue. Now, I use, there's 2 tubes of paint here, just quickly. Now, one
they
is,
can't see you.
they can't see. One is $5 and one is $95. Now, if I'm charging a lot for art takes me, my paintings can take 3 months of working from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. Detailed, a lot of detail. Now, I mix up my colours on a palette. Now, there was 53 shades of blue in that shirt.
Well, let's get back to the shirt and have a look at
so
the
what
shirt.
a little tip for artists, I have a palette for each colour. So it might take me a day to just mix my colours up. And I'll have a palette of blue, a palette of yellow, a palette of red, and different tones. Now, I use oils because acrylics just have one flat colour. You can't get pigments. And you get depth of pigments in an oil painting. Now, I also like to put a little something of myself into the paintings, which I've revealed to Brian. I always have something in every painting that people don't know about.
They keep secrets, and
most artists do.
I said, I need your secret. And if you have a look at this painting, it's very detailed, even on the shirt, the little bits of writing. But if you have a look right there, there's a little patch of yellow.
And I've put my children's names in. And something else that I'm known for, I use iridescent oils. Now, a lot of you probably have seen Monet's water works, and you probably didn't realize, but where he gets that shimmer on the lake is he uses an iridescent. Now, an iridescent is like a crushed pearl. If you think of a crushed pearl, it is the light shimmer in it, and it reflects light. So I use that iridescent and mix it in with my colors so that when the light hits the painting, it comes alive.
Fantastic. Well, John Morrison, suddenly you've come to life with me, and I love this painting. It's in your house?
It is at the moment.
I remember seeing it. Now, we're going to flash very quickly past this.
Oh, we're going past this?
No. Okay, we've got a few seconds. This is Gay Waterhouse.
This is Gay Waterhouse.
This painting...
Or do you want to go back to the other one?
No, I'm going to go to another one.
Okay.
I just want to show you what happened. This painting has recently been accepted by the National Gallery, correct?
What happened is I painted Gay, and that's sitting at her table. The teacup, if you notice, took a week to paint, just the teacup, the red teacup. If you look around, I use red so the eye travels. So your eye's running around the whole painting, and the point was to have it travel around. got accepted in the National Portrait Gallery as a semi-finalist for the last year for the Darling Portrait Prize. But they rang me up and said, it's too wide. Can you chop off the end?
Hold on, I've got to just, can you chop off the end? And here is the end of the Gay Waterhouse.
Now, some people don't realize what artists go through. And sometimes you have to trim, cut, reshape, repaint,
I think it's a
reframe.
disaster.
Then what happened, unfortunately, when it came back, it wasn't finished off properly on the edge, so they couldn't hang it.
Well, there you can see on the right-hand side is what we've had to cut off.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then I've had to trim it right back to the hat so that it would fit, and it's 150 long. And then I've had to tidy it up. So now it's
Great.
back.
But we weren't going to talk about this painting.
No, you put it up.
I put her up just to show. This is the one that I wanted to talk
okay,
about.
this is Gay. I stayed with Gay to paint her for 2 days. I followed her everywhere. And she said to me, I said, where are you happiest? And I always asked my sitters to wear what they want and to sit how they want and be comfortable. Now, she told me 4 a.m. on track. We went to the track 4 a.m. and that was her. Now, that painting was over 7 foot high. I don't do 7 foot anymore because I forget when I'm painting. I'm up on a ladder. I'll step back to have a look and I'll crash on the floor, and my bottom couldn't take too much more of that. So now I've trimmed them down to height where I can reach up. It won, just so that you know, it won for the whole of Australia, the whole of New Zealand, the whole of Hong Kong, Asia, Singapore. I won the Australasia first prize for the Cliftons Art Prize with that.
Fantastic. It's one of my favorite paintings. It's
look at the detail on the jacket.
I mean, the jacket is just amazing.
I know, it went cross-eyed. But
okay, we got 1 or 2 to go, and I just this is your great story.
This is Bryn and Jeff Edelston. Now, this they asked me to come and see them in Melbourne and paint their portrait. And when I do that, I ask, can I have a year to put it into art prizes before they accept the commission? And they've said yes with this. And it went into the Doug Moran as a finalist. It was exhibited also in Parliament House, Canberra, because remember, he was, for all his other things, he was quite a well-known doctor who first brought in bulk bill surgeries, just to remind you. That wasn't a common thing, and you'd go into the surgery and there'd be a piano playing, and really interesting people. So I went into his apartment in Melbourne and I say, wear what you like. So they came out, and Bryn came out. Her dress was totally sheer with nothing underneath, just sequin stitched. She said, where do you want me? And I said, sitting down with your hands in your lap. So she did. So thank goodness. And then Jeff came out and he had a yellow shirt, a huge tummy. And he said, where do you want me? And I said, behind Bryn, which they did. And I called it Our World because they had a map of the world and it was their world. But they also had a dog, a Juddy, their favourite dog. And
see him down there.
I see him down there. Now, Juddy had to have its own sitting. It had a Chanel jacket on. And now I happened at the time to have Saatchi, dog, the same. And I said, can I just paint my dog to save, coming back and forth to Melbourne? And they said, no, we'll come up to Sydney to your studio, which they did. It's fine. And Juddy needed to have a detailed sitting. And Juddy did. And they came, and that's me in my studio. And you can see I still hadn't painted the background. It took a lot of time. As long as I got them right, I had to get them to approve that they were happy with everything.
Well, I'm looking at this painting and I find it fascinating that on the right-hand side, there's a photograph of you and the buildings aren't painted in. And just have a look at the detail of the chandelier that was painted in, the detail on her dress, and the buildings behind. The difference, it's quite amazing.
It is.
And I
it
love
took a
this.
long time.
So I'm going to ask a silly question. What happened to this painting?
This painting took me 3 months, again, every day from morning till night, to paint and to work and to do the details. And after it had been on exhibition and been in the Doug Moran and been in Canberra in Parliament House, I sent it back to him. I got paid. I banked this check, 34,000. Then fortunately, the Bryn was out and there was a new girlfriend in.
As they do.
She didn't like the painting. And Jeff rang me and said she smashed it. And he said, what can we do? And I said, look, we have a problem. I said, if you like, I can paint your new wife peering out through the, make it decorative and have it peeled and have out with the old, in with the new, and title it like that. But before we even got to talk about anything, because we're trying to see how he could save it, the new one was out as well. And they were ringing me up and wanting me to be in with the divorce case to try, and he was trying to sue her for the 34,000 so that he didn't have to pay her.
Oh my God.
I didn't want to come in that. I've lost also my royalties, you realise, you know. So,
but you can, I mean, that one with the hole in is pretty good, I think.
yeah, it's unique.
Well, guys, we're coming to the end of our little chat. Mike, I don't know if there are any questions.
No questions as yet. I'm just going to put out a message.
Look, there's very little that Vivian hasn't said. We finish on this note, and I'd just like to say my prediction for any questions would have been on this one, but we've preempted it and spoke about the Rebbe a little earlier. So I'm going to call on Mike Fisher now to thank you for this very interesting talk.
Thank you.
We keep finding out things about ourselves, and I certainly find out things about you, and I guess we're going to have some tea now, and I'm going to find out a little bit more. But it's great getting together again. I'm going to ask Mike, but before I do, I'd just like to, I don't think I did this earlier. I'm getting a bit, my birthday, I'm getting a bit sloppy. I'd like to thank all the people, the Alte Zagen, the people that can come to our meetings for the tzedakah that they have passed on through our organization. And every single cent of that has gone on to Jewish care. This year, we have raised around about $10,000 through our group, and I think it's fantastic. And I'd like to thank everyone who's ever made a contribution, just to let you know that you will receive some information if you want to make a contribution. It is not, you're not obliged to. We didn't ask for big contributions, $5, $10, $18 high would be absolutely beautiful, and all that money is passed on to Jewish care. So from me, I'd just like to say I'm off to have a birthday. From Vivian, she's saying, I knew I'd get something. Vivian, from you, and I'd like Mike just to give a word of thanks. Mike, over to you.
All right. Vivian, I often do the thank yous at the end of our Alte Zagen talks. This is exceptionally challenging because you are a woman of so many talents and so many facets. Where to start and where to finish to encompass them all and do justice to you is very, very difficult. I think what we've glimpsed today in the hour could be a series on the ABC, Your Story. And I think you would keep the viewing public engaged for weeks on end. I think the theme today should be not similar to your book. I think your story today is Your Roots Revealed, going back to the time of your family, its involvement and persecution in the early days of Nazism, and the quirky connections with Adolf Hitler's doctor, the photograph of your mother with Eichmann, and then your family's going as a refugee, the Patria story, through to Israel, your early life as a settler in Israel, as a refugee. And all this goes back to the instinct of survival, resilience and strength that I think your father imbued in you and imbued in your mother and your family. And then coming to Australia as a refugee. And from those very humble beginnings to see you today as a woman who's so renowned for the magnificent artwork that you've made, which is an absolute legacy. The high-profile people that you've painted, the awards that you've won, the exhibitions that you've been in. This really is your legacy. So it's on behalf of us all, I say it's been an absolute pleasure to have listened to your stories, to have witnessed the examples of your creativity, your artistic flair, and the wonderful way you've narrated this. So on behalf of us all at Alte Zagen, I thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that brings our meeting to an end, and we look forward next month to another meeting and catching up with everybody.
Let's bring you back on the
Thank you.
spotlight.
Thank you. So as I say, till then, stay safe.